Well, we'll start. We'll start wherever
Hello?
Brenda wants to start.
I think it was working.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's working. I'm Ann Ward, and I'm a consultant for Tetaf.
I'm Sharon Beasley, and I'm with the Texas Hospital Association.
Hello?
There.
I'm Hillary Watt. I'm RAC-U, Corpus Christi.
Jennifer Carr, Corpus Christi Medical Center, RAC-U.
David Smith, Fort Worth, Texas, RAC-E.
LaJuan Smith, RAC-E.
Diana Grimmap, RAC-R.
David Reeves, RAC-Q.
Daryl Pyle, RAC-Q.
Carrie Hecht, RAC-E.
Marianne Contreras, RAC-E.
Linda Dickerson, GTAC.
Charles Jake with RAC-M.
Michael Burrows with RAC-K.
Mary Beth Grimion, RAC-G.
Cheryl Coffey, RAC-G.
Melissa Kristen, RAC-E.
Jennifer Gardner, RAC-E.
Leanne Bedrick, RAC-E.
Rick Antonese, E.
Terry Rowden, RAC-G.
Christine Reeves, Trauma Service Area M.
Wanda Helgeson, Border RAC, TSAI.
Ruben Pena, RAC-V.
Aaron Teskey, RAC-V.
Courtney DeBauer, American Heart Association.
Derek Vaughn, RAC-A.
Justin Boyd, RAC-A.
Christy Dyer, RAC-J.
Connie Thompson, RAC-J.
Bobby Saunders, lots of different racks.
Bonnie Skodak, RAC-E.
Jeremy Taylor, RAC-E.
Brandy Lapaya, RAC-N. Sherry Jennings, RAC-N.
Billy Rice, also RAC-N.
Susan Rasco, RAC-J.
Brenda Linville, RAC-A.
Carolyn Knox, RAC-S.
Robin Gage, RAC-F.
Lou Schaefer, RAC-C.
Laura Pressler, RAC-C.
Kim Stringfellow, RAC-C.
Bill Sikora, RAC-C.
Roy Tamao, RAC-B.
Cindy Williams, RAC-P.
Felicia Powell, RAC-U.
Danny Updike, K.
Jim Waters, RAC-B.
Did we miss anybody? Oh, yeah.
I was doing the checking down here, so just to make sure that I got everybody represented. RAC-D, as in dog. Anybody here? RAC-K?
Yeah.
Okay, good. L? O? T? Okay, welcome everybody. Appreciate y'all coming this morning. Next on the agenda is we got some affiliate organizations. I heard American Heart, I heard GTAC, I heard Texas Hospital Association, Department of State Health Services in the room. No. And I guess we're two division reports, right?
Yeah.
Or
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brenda Putz. We're going to run through some division reports for you. We're going to begin with the Acute Care Division and Lisa Hutchison.
Good morning, everybody. Acute Care is planning the Texas Cardio Neurology Conference. It will be held on September 26th at the Hyatt Lost Pines Resort. Brenda has been working diligently to get these brochures out to y'all, and I want to thank Ann and Dinah for helping get all this together. Anyway, we have a great list of speakers from the cardiac world as well as the stroke world. Lots of topics about upcoming research. So we're real excited about this. So if everybody take a look at this, and if you can, plan to be there. Any questions?
Thank you. These brochures are out here. If anybody needs any more, just let us know. Any questions? It's at the Hyatt Regency in Bastrop.
The Lost Pines Resort.
Yeah, Hyatt Regency, Lost Pines Resort and Spa in Lost Pines, Texas, but it's Bastrop, right outside of Bastrop. Okay, Dr. Rock isn't here, but Kelly Harrell is. Come on up, Kelly. You all know Kelly Harrell. She's been working with Tetaf, and she's also been instrumental in helping us work on our events that are coming up, and she's been working with Dr. Rock in the EMS division on the webinars.
Yes, Dr. Rock and I have been speaking sporadically. We did one webinar on April 30th with Joe Schmieder. We had record attendance. I think at one point we had about 152 people on the line, and Joe did a tremendous job. He really was very helpful. We are looking now for ideas for speakers for upcoming webinars. I have not heard recently from Dr. Rock, but I hold out hope that we're going to get together and his schedule is going to ease up a little bit, and we're going to find some more speakers. So if you have any ideas, please email me. I have my cards outside. And also I'm working on, with Brenda, a RAC J conference in August and the conference in September at Lost Pines. Is that it, Brenda? I can't remember. I had 6 different projects going at one point.
As soon as we fold these, they'll be out for the RAC J conference.
Okay, it looks like I'm going to go fold some brochures.
Sorry.
Kelly, what kind of conference are y'all targeting for RAC J?
This is Connie Thompson and her committee. They came up with a really super idea of, it's called the Permian Basin Conference, but it is really centered on the oil boom and the kind of injuries they have out there. So it's a health and safety conference. And there's our phone. And it got great speakers, Dr. Griswold, Dr. Durgan, Jeff Beeson, our own Christine Reeves. Got some really good speakers about what is really becoming a busy scene out there in Midland. Any other questions?
Thank you, Kelly. We will move on to education and Courtney Edwards. Robin? Okay. Robin Garza for prevention.
So for injury prevention, we're moving forward with the Just Drive campaign. As you recall, we started a initial phase for the research in affiliation with Texas Tech University, and we identified 5 beta site communities in which we did a pre-educational research project. That was completed in the fall. We have completed education in all 5 of those communities, and we are now currently in the post-educational data collection phase where we can hopefully have some good outcomes from the project, the education that has been put into the Just Drive campaign. I have been informed that there are a couple of RACs that have taken this project on and are really starting to devote some time and efforts into it. And I just want to identify those RACs. I believe the first one is RAC J, and they have actually gotten the oil industry and their community involved and have been able to get some funding and financial support with the safety officers within the oil industry in their area. So, you know, that's a great way to integrate the program into the community. The other one, I believe, is RAC A, that is adopting the program and is going to move that throughout the RAC. And in RAC Q, my RAC, we will be concentrating some effort starting this month on this program. So I put the plea out to the other RACs to look at the program, see what you can do to integrate it throughout your community. If you go to the TTAF website, there are multiple resources available for you to do that. There's no recreating a program. It's there for you. And if there's anything that we can do to help you do that, Ann Ward, Brenda, or myself will be happy to be that resource, to be that go-to person to help you do that. The second thing with injury prevention is we are gearing up for our Trauma Injury Prevention Symposium, our TIPS program, which will be offered next February prior to these meetings, on the Monday prior to these meetings. So if you'll just put that on your calendar, more information about that will come.
Also RAC K.
RAC
K. With
K,
Danny
RAC
Epcot.
K. So thank you, RAC J, K, A, and Q.
The other event that's about to occur is that we're about to do our evaluation, our surveys again in the phase 2 communities. So that's coming up in the next month or so to see if we've impacted behavior change. Coy Callison out of Texas Tech will be managing that survey for us as well. Courtney Edwards. No?
So TIPS is what we're working on, and then Lisa's also going to give some more information about one of the other things that we're working on.
And also the education is providing CEs for the RAC-J conference and the stroke conference in the fall. So we're working on that. And that will include the paramedic CEs. Okay,
Brenda,
pediatrics.
Brenda, or Courtney. Yes. As we create these continuing education hours, I know there was opportunity yesterday to provide continuing medical education. Is that something we're moving towards, or something that's just off the table, or?
It's not off the table, but it's not being, we haven't even started to pursue that yet. We've been successful with the nursing CEs and the paramedics, but the additional cost and need for staff to take care of the CME, we haven't done it yet, but it's still on the table.
Okay.
We'll probably look at that in 2015.
Good, great.
Okay. Lori, pediatrics.
Since our last meeting, we have had a couple of more phone calls with EMSC, working on a partnership with the Pediatric Division of TTAF and EMSC on creation of an education program that's pediatric specific. We do now have an agenda to review, and I'll be following up with Brenda on that. The need still probably to do a survey, though, to really drill down to more specifics on pediatric needs will probably be done, which would be sent out to all of the RACs to get some more information really at the ground level and what everyone's needs are. And then the only other announcement, Sandy Williams is here. San Antonio Children's Hospital is our second pediatric hospital in the state of Texas to receive a level 3 trauma designation. So we congratulate Sandy Williams and her team at San Antonio Children's. She's in the back of the room. Sandy, raise your hand.
Thanks, Lori. Any questions for Lori? Okay, we'll move on to the RAC report from Shay Watson.
Good morning. The RAC division, we're continuing to work with TTAF on the sunset process. We're also continuing to work on our strategic RAC initiatives by focusing on making key contacts within all of our regions and providing public education on what the RAC systems can do for our regions. As Robin previously reported, several RACs have launched their Just Drive campaign with mass mailouts and multiple media campaigns.
Any questions for Shay? All right, we'll move on to the trauma report with Lisa Price.
Okay. We're happy to announce that we now have our geriatric resources page online. If you go to the ttaf.org website and look under the trauma division, there is a link to the geriatric resources that has both documents and links to other geriatric trauma-specific and geriatric care resources. Another project we're working on is development of burn guidelines for non-trauma centers. There's a great working draft in process. They're putting on kind of the final touches and working that through, and we hope to have a final product, work product to distribute probably by May. Yeah, I mean, we are in May. By August. Probably before that, but I'm not gonna put any pages on us, I guess. We are still working on the productivity guidelines. As I have said before, this is a project that's going to take quite a bit of time. And so we're right now kind of working through how to gather the data that we need to then move forward with putting together a draft and a work product. So
Dinah has the trauma division page up now, so we can see all of the activities and the publications that that division has been working through. Has a lot of effort. Thank you. We appreciate y'all's hard work on that. Before we leave the divisions, I just want to make one announcement. The surveyor meeting tomorrow will begin after the Trauma Systems Committee ends. Instead of 11:30, probably closer to 12. So for any surveyors in the room attending the meeting tomorrow, just plan on it being after the meeting. Any questions for any of the division chairs or me? Thank you all. We appreciate everything you do. Scott?
Okay, thank y'all very much. Good work, good work. I guess we're to TTAF update, number 4 on the agenda.
Yes, so it's been a slow month. Lot has obviously been going on. We have been very focused on the Sunset Advisory Commission, and then had the new wrinkle of dealing with tobacco funds and trying to figure out what has happened there. And so I want to give you all an update on both those items. But first of all, I wanted to just point out that on the TTAF website, we do have the 2013 annual report posted. We've got a few copies here. Board members have received copies, but if you'd like to view that, it is on our website. Also, just to start with a positive, we do have a governor's proclamation regarding Trauma Awareness Month. So we are getting some media awareness of that, as well as EMS. This is the month of awareness, so we are all very aware. And thank you all for all that you do to support the trauma and emergency healthcare system. We did have a meeting. I won't waste a lot of time on other issues, but we did have a meeting on Friday here in Austin, and it was a legislative action meeting. And we came together primarily because of the tobacco fund issue that had sprung up, and trying to get a better understanding of what's happened and how we move forward. And I think we had a really good meeting that was valuable to those that were able to attend. And for those of you that were not able to attend, I do have some packets for the RAC chair or ED. I want to make sure that everybody gets touched on that, and I want to have a private conversation with each one of you all just to make sure that y'all are aware of all of our discussions and are fully informed. The down and dirty is a few weeks ago. The Department of State Health Services invited myself and Dr. Eastridge, Dr. Stewart, Dr. Tyrock, and Jory Klein to a call about budget issues. And before the call ended, there was a lot of gnashing of teeth, and I think people were coming a little unglued because we were told that the tobacco funds that actually the department thought, because the appropriations bill indicated so, that we were actually, the trauma system was going to get additional dollars, but lo and behold, the disbursement to the 2 dishes is going to be less than anticipated. And so then the big question is, why did that happen? How did that happen? And the short story is that the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas was appropriated almost $32 million from the permanent tobacco funds for EMS and trauma care. And we've done considerable research. I know there are several that have. Ricky Reeves is quite the sleuth as well. And he and I've had fun working with Ricky because he and I seem to be on the same page and find things about the same time. And ultimately, the funds were taken out in a special session in a school finance bill, and there was no reference whatsoever to tobacco, EMS, trauma, healthcare, anything. It refers to it as a permanent fund under Section 403.1068. And in the bill, it was relating to fiscal matters, so you always look at those bills because they can be Christmas trees. But again, the bill is focused primarily on school funding and school finance. And so when there is a reference to permanent fund, I think the assumption was that it was education funds that they were drawing from. CPRIT, for those of you, I don't want to go into a great deal of education on it, but CPRIT is a huge organization that was created in 2007. It was constitutionally created. The state can fund it up to $3 billion. So it is a big, big monster. And it was heavily supported by Governor Perry and Lance Armstrong when his star was a little bit shinier and his yellow jersey was a little bit more exciting in the state. So it was passed at that point in time, and then the state, since it was passed, has had challenges, obviously, finding $3 billion. And so they've sort of been pinching from different areas to find those dollars. And they've also been scrutinized quite a bit about how their funds have been used. But what we try to focus on our meeting, at our meeting on Friday, was, yes, it's important to understand how this happened. It's frustrating. It's irritating. It was not done in the light of day. I think it was it was an attempt to find additional dollars, have them go to the CPRIT, the Cancer Institute, without a debate, without a discussion about should those dollars from the tobacco funds be used for other purposes. I think in a back room, people can make the direct link of cancer and tobacco, yes, but that discussion, that hearing never took place, and so that's frustrating. So we do know that it took place. The state, yes.
Am I to understand that this happened in 2011, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that TTAF, Texas Hospital Association, Texas Medical Association, and all the lobbyists out there that are concerned about health care, trauma care, EMS care, have software packages that pick up on keywords that nobody, this hit nobody's radar in 2011 that this was happening. I've heard that on the street. I'm just kind of wanting to confirm.
That is my understanding. And if you look at the witness list for the bill that this was actually passed in, it is all school administrators, superintendents, teachers. There was never a discussion, debate about the merits of using the tobacco dollars. And I know when you accuse a legislator of doing something underhanded, they obviously bristle. Their reaction is, well, it was in the bill, it was out there, there was a hearing. The frustration is that there was no indication. You had to know specifically that Section 403.1068 was the permanent tobacco fund for EMS and trauma care. And there are, in all honesty, there are a lot of funds that I do happen to know those numbers. The permanent tobacco fund, because it was passed in 1997, 99, it is not, and it hadn't been touched. It's not a number that came up in our queues. So that, you know, it passed without much of a blip on, well, I haven't found that anybody had a blip on their radar. So that has happened. What we found, because I know there's a real strong desire of who did this, how do we find them, how do we hang them, et cetera, et cetera. The challenge is those people are probably the exact same people that are going to help us out. These were the conference committee, the budget conferees, so the top tier of legislators were supportive of this ultimately. And so we can spend a lot of time focusing on who did it, but again, I think those are the people that we're going to need to help us. One of the things that we discussed on Friday at our legislative meeting is, yes, we have a hole now in the tobacco endowment funds of $32 million. What that amounts to is the $4.7 million that the Department of State Health Services has been getting the last several years from interest earned off the tobacco funds. It's $4.7 million that's then distributed to RACs, to EMS agencies. The department uses a great deal of those funds to operate the EMS and trauma system. So it is critical, but that $4.7 million, when we're looking at big picture of what the needs are for the trauma community, I think it's important to point out that there is a hole. We're not happy about it. But if we spend a lot of time and energy trying to fill that particular hole back, our return on our investment is a couple $1 million. And I think what I'm hearing and what we are collecting as far as data is that our need is much, much greater for the EMS trauma community. And so I think it's important that we note this and we spend some time on it. Our attention and our focus really should be on continuing to hit home that designated trauma facilities incur over $200 million in uncompensated trauma care. That House Bill 3588 does not fill that hole for those hospitals. That RACs are inadequately funded for what they were created to do and what they now do. And with the cuts that RACs are feeling from HPP funds, now from tobacco, and then also House Bill 3588 fund, RACs had seen a reduction in the dollars that they were getting there. So I think we need to focus on what is our big ask, and it's not $2 million. I mean, at the end of the day, if all we're coming up with is we need $2 million more, I think we've got some problems. So I think while it's important that we spend some time addressing this tobacco issue, because I think it is an injustice. It was something that was set up by the legislature, by the people of Texas, that they had a reasonable expectation that those permanent funds would be permanent. And I will spend just a second talking about that. We had all learned that designated does not mean designated. We've all learned that dedicated does not mean dedicated. And now we've learned that permanent does not mean permanent. Permanent means it is permanent until the next legislature meets. And so, again, there was some frustration, I know, that was aired on Friday of how do we make a permanent fund permanent? Well, the one way to do it is through a constitutional amendment, which that can always be repealed, but that's a lot harder, first of all, to get passed, but second of all, once it is passed, it's hard to repeal. So we are looking at that option, going the direction that CPRIT did to begin with, to be founded was with a constitutional amendment that takes 2/3 approval by the legislature, and then it goes before the people to be voted on. So it's not an easy road, but one that actually Ricky Reeves had called me one day, and what if, we did this? And I think it's certainly possible. He's had Leanne, and he had a conversation with Senator Nelson's staff last week, and constitutional amendments are something that most legislators don't jump up and down about because it is just that much harder to pass. But I think it is a possibility for us as we move forward. So where do we go from here, I think is one of the big questions. And my other question is, how do I get this off? Starla! I lost my... That's an excellent question. And as long as there are legislators and the political process, it will happen again. If there are legislators that want something like this to happen, and it could be for hungry, needy children. I want to make that clear. We are not, the trauma community is not against CPRIT. we are against the way this was funded. I think we can all probably stand up and say we've all been touched by cancer in some form or fashion with family members or friends. We are not against CPRIT. We do not want to throw stones at that Goliath. What we are against is the way it was funded. There is no guarantee that this will not happen again. And I think that's part of what we need to do is we need to, right now, the permanent fund for EMS and trauma care, that door is still open, that additional funds could be taken from that. So I think that's very important that we close that door, that no more dollars go out, that we maintain what's left, the $66 or so million that's there. But it's like the dedicated, designated, permanent. If there is a will, there is a way with the legislature. Believe it or not, the process overall is more open than it used to be. When I first started working up at the Capitol a couple years ago, we used to run through the rotundas back and forth from the House to Senate to literally tape on amendments to bills that would be passed literally at the 11th hour of the last day of session. And nobody saw that stuff that was going on. So while the process is more open, these things do happen. And when you've got budget bills that are thousands of pages long, they can always slip things in. What we have to do, and we have already begun to do, is to educate legislators on what our need is. That they understand that you cannot just take, a couple million here and a couple million there from the trauma community, that we are hurting and that we do have needs, and to quantify what those needs are. So that's one of the things that we are working on feverishly. Some of what we provided on Friday to those RAC leaders that were there was this packet. And again, I'll make sure that those of you that weren't able to be with us, and I do understand when we pull these legislative meetings together, they will be last minute and they will be hurried. And I apologize for that on one hand, but if we don't hurry, we are going to miss our opportunity. And so sometimes these things are going to come together in just a couple weeks. And so I do sincerely apologize that I know that fact alone means that we will not have 100% participation, but it is important that we move forward. And for those of you that are able to be part of those meetings, to come, and those of you that aren't, I still want to make sure that you are involved through direct conversations with myself or others that may be attending the meetings. And then we'll obviously try to open those up to speaker or webinars if we need to include as many people as possible. Some of the things that we have developed, TTAF, is we had put out, and it is on our website still, the facts about changes to the Permanent Tobacco Fund for EMS and trauma care. So if what I have said sounds like just complete mud, hopefully this will clarify some of what has happened, where the dollars have gone, and as you talk to your legislators, just to ask them about those tobacco funds. There is a lot of discussion about transparency in the legislature, but again, these things still happen. We did work on a document that we will continue to massage and improve, but it is titled Texas Trauma and Emergency Healthcare System. What we have done is we have put together various bullet points on the trauma and emergency healthcare system, and some of the key points we feel as we talk to legislators, because that's been a big question. Okay, what am I supposed to go talk to my legislator about? Well, we've tried to put that all together. We go through RACs, we talk about the driver responsibility program, we talk about EMS providers, and then also a little bit about the hospital preparedness program and those cuts. And so trying our best to surmise what is going on out there, what the need is. As we move forward and as this is perfected, I think I will think of this as a living document, that as we get more facts and figures, one of the things that we discussed on Friday was the need for EMS data to fill in what is the EMS need. We know there is a need for additional dollars in the EMS community for trauma services, but what is that dollar figure? Also for the RACs, we are developing a questionnaire that will go around to the RACs so we can pinpoint what the costs are for the RACs. And that we can compile that number, and we'll insert that as we get that information as well. So this will be available. We will have this in a protected area and should have that out, I would hope, by next week maybe, Ann, that we could work with our website person and get that information out to the RACs so that you all can pull that. Also, what we spent some time on was just ideas for RACs to enhance their legislative contacts. I know there's always concern for the RACs of I don't want to appear to be lobbying. Well, educating your legislator, letting them know what a RAC is, letting them come to your meetings, letting them come to your conferences. They would love those photo opportunities at some of your conferences, at some of your disaster drills, standing next to a bunch of your RAC executives and an ambulance. That is a great photo to go in their local paper. And at that same opportunity, you have the time to tell them what's going on in your RAC, what a RAC is. And that is going to be key to our success as we move forward this next legislative session. Another thing that we have developed that we will make sure that you all have is the legislative contact information. What we are asking and is this is in an Adobe format, so you can fill it out online, click send, y'all can keep a copy. We'd love to keep a copy as well. It basically goes through, and I would put my name, names of any members of the U.S. Congress whom I know, and how I know them, Texas House of Representatives, Texas Senate, other statewide elected officials. And sometimes it's, I don't know my state representative, but I know who she is or he is. And that can be a key contact for us, is just to know that Hillary knows Todd Hunter in Corpus Christi. And that, gosh, Todd Hunter is our linchpin to getting a bill put on the House calendar. And if we get everybody that says they are constituent, I vote in Todd Hunter's district, we get them to get on the phone to call Todd Hunter. That is going to make our advocacy that much more effective. Because I can call, Dr. Smith can call, but we don't vote for Todd Hunter. We don't have that opportunity to vote for him, and it makes a big difference. So yes, volume's important, but if you actually are in that district, that's huge. So this is another tool that we will be using, getting this out to all of you, again, electronically, so you can distribute to your board and your members and try to get a network of, I mean, the goal would be that every single House member, every single senator, every single congressional member, that we have some contact for, and hopefully more than one. In addition to that, we have just finishing up our contract with Voter Voice, which is a software company. I think some of you all are aware of this type of software where you get the alert, and in the alert it says contact your legislator now. You click on the link and you enter some information about your name, your address, and it'll pop up, oh, your state representative is Todd Hunter, oh, your state representative, and so then you can send information directly to that legislator at that moment. That will be helpful. Again, that's a volume issue, and that will help get the word out, but those key contacts will also be key as we move forward. We've also developed a few other pieces for the RACs on ideas to enhance your legislative contacts. We've also put together a template of I know many of you all already have brochures, but what we've tried to do is sort of insert RAC name here, insert RAC data here, that you can take this electronically, polish it up for your rack. So I think this will be helpful to some of you all. Then we've also put together a template for legislators to invite them and to involve them. We discussed quite a bit legislators and some of the key legislators that we will be working with in the next year. The next legislative session starts in January, and it goes until the end of May. So this time next year, I may not have any hair, but we'll be near the end. Trying to. Any questions of me at this point in time? Yes. These documents, a lot of these documents are RAC-centric, and we're making sure that the RAC EDs, chairs, have those documents electronically. We have had a page on our website that is password protected, but we have not utilized it to this point. As we start having more of these documents that are a little more proprietary, and we don't want legislator A knowing, everything directly from, there's some information we're happy for them to share or see, but then there are specific items that we will make sure behind the password protected area, and we should have that to you all. My hope would be that it won't take that long because we already have it there, and it's just a matter of getting it up. We're not going to make the password crazy to get into, but again, just to put a little bit of a firewall so that it's not there for public use. Yes.
So Donna, the cut that was made in the tobacco principle, or whatever that word is, that's a done deal, right? There's no fixing that between now and the next legislative session.
That is correct. And what my understanding is, though, is that while the department was anticipating that they would only have $2.4 million available for 2014 and 2015, so a $2.2 million reduction, or excuse me, $2.3 million reduction in what they had been receiving in the last several years, that the department has already announced that for 2014 that they've been able to find other funds within the department, and so that in 2014 funding should be maintained at the same level as previous years. The question had been about 2015 that they were a couple million short. I had heard from Kathy Perkins a week or so ago, it all runs together, but a couple weeks ago, that they were about $1 million short. And from what I understand now, with some discussions with legislative staff and others, is that the department has found additional dollars that for 2014 and 2015, that funding streams should remain whole. And I have not heard that directly from Kathy Perkins and her staff, but that is my understanding from legislators and legislative staff. Is that so? That's the good news, is that we have this gaping hole now in tobacco funds, but the funding to the RACs and EMS agencies should remain the same for 2014, 2015. The question will be when the legislature does meet again, based on the corpus of the tobacco fund now being a little over $60 million, the interest that's earned on $60 million, $65 million is a little different than $100 million. I'd take either one, but the interest that is earned on the 65. So that's where we got to only $2.4 million that was going to be distributed to the trauma and emergency healthcare community.
So is that the message we need to be taking to the legislators, is we want all the interest and or we want additional sources of funding?
I think, and again, for those that attended the meeting on Friday, the fact that $33 million was taken from the tobacco fund is significant, but we can be so focused on that we lose sight of that $33 million amounts to $2 million that is distributed to our community every year. And I think the win is that we're actually looking at tens of millions of dollars that we're asking for in RAC funding, EMS funding, and additional uncompensated dollars to hospitals. So it's going to be sort of a marrying of messages of, yes, we're irritated about permanent tobacco funds, but let me tell you about what our real need is. Our real need is not $2 million. Our real need is 20 million, 40 million, 60 million, whatever that number ends up being. And that's part of what came out of our meeting on Friday, is to task with getting additional data so that we can have those figures as we refine these talking points on the trauma system, that it says $40 million is needed for EMS, $20 million is needed for RACs, and this is why, and this is how that's quantified. So again, we've got there's a balancing act of acknowledging that we've been wronged, we're irritated, we're mad. With the Sunset, I haven't even talked about the Sunset Commission, but the Sunset Advisory Commission, they are looking at the Department of State Health Services. They pick up every single rock and decide if that rock needs to stay in the agency, or maybe the agency just goes away altogether. I don't think that's going to happen with the health agencies. But they do look at every single thing, and so there's an opportunity there. The Sunset Advisory Commission staff report is due out in the next couple weeks. With that report, they will have recommendations, and I have said publicly that I think there will probably be recommendations that will have some of us screaming for the doors. I don't know what that is exactly. I've had great conversations with the Sunset staff. I think they are very, very smart people, very educated, but they also don't live our world. They don't understand the trauma world, and they are looking for efficiencies in state government. Efficiencies often mean consolidation. And so I think, one of the discussions that I had with the Sunset staff was about, why are there 22 RACs? And, discuss the importance of regionalization. So with a Sunset staff report, there's almost always something in there that just makes everybody scream. But at the end of the day, there's a hearing that will be held the last week of June by the Sunset Advisory Commission members, which are 10 legislators and 2 public members, so 12-member panel. They will review the staff report. They'll take testimony at that point in time. And then from that hearing in June, they take several months to write then their report that comes out in September, sometime in the fall usually. And from that report, legislation will be filed and legislation will be pushed. That doesn't mean that everything, by any stretch of the imagination, that comes out in a staff report in May ends up being passed as legislation in May a year from now. But that's the process. And so there's a real opportunity, I think, with the Sunset Advisory Commission to look at the trauma system, emergency healthcare systems. How do we really want them to look? And I've had discussions. I know Dudley Waite and others have had discussions with the Sunset Advisory Commission about, what do we think the trauma system should look like? What do we think the emergency healthcare system in Texas should look like? And what components are needed for that? So there's the opportunity with the Sunset Advisory Commission, which I think will stir up a lot of interest, or it already has. They are very interested, focused on trauma and emergency healthcare. They're very interested in EMS fraud, and feeling like some of the things that were passed last session are. The hope is that will do a lot to do away with fraud in the system, but they certainly have not done away with. They do not think that system is clean yet.
Mr. Powell, did you have a comment or question?
Well, I just wanted to thank Diane and Tetaf. Made a great job with the material they're putting together. I do encourage you to talk to your RAC EDs and at least say, hey, I'm planning to do this. What do you think? Or maybe
In the appropriations bill, Justin, real quickly on that, in the appropriations bill, account 5046, which is the permanent tobacco fund for EMS and trauma, there was actually additional dollars that were appropriated there. So that's what the state started looking at, the department started looking at, and from that there was, I believe it's 6.8 million that was appropriated per year to go to dishes for tobacco EMS. In a complete separate section article of the appropriations bill is where the tobacco funds were bonded, put up as bond money for CPRIT. And so it's two completely different transactions in a different article, an article that we usually are not monitoring because, I mean, you really have to focus on areas. That money for the CPRIT bond came out before the state essentially got their money, before the department got their money for tobacco and EMS. And I think Kathy, myself, anybody that's been involved, I mean, we've all hit our heads of how could we not have seen this. And I don't have a perfect answer for that, but I take some satisfaction in that nobody else seemed to have seen it. And I think, to me, then it feels very intentional. And I don't mean that as an excuse because it is frustrating. But this did not happen in the pure light of day. It was by them not referencing it as a tobacco fund, as an EMS fund, as a trauma fund, as a healthcare fund, and putting it in a school finance bill. So I think we can all wring our heads. I could, I've hit my head against the wall, but again, I think we all have to do better. Believe me. Section 403.1068 is now on my search list. And I've also gone through and identified all the other bills and what their section number is in statutes that were created decades ago.
So once you move through all those stages of emotional swing and
Denial.
and you get to acceptance and you get to some sort of hope, there's like no better time than when it's happened because there's a legislative session coming up. I mean, how perfect. Also, there's a lot more people moving to Texas now. There's a lot more demands on the trauma system than ever before. And if we just went and asked for trauma money, we would have had to start from that point. But now we can go and say, woe is me, did you hear what happened to our funds? And then you ask for more. So I think we've got a point of agreement as soon as we walk in the door with any of these legislators that this was not fair. This is too bad that this has happened. And then you ask for more. So I think we need to get excited about this. I think it needs to be highly, highly organized. And it has to be done quickly and in a time frame that's organized. Everybody knows somebody, and if you don't go to the legislature, you probably know a school teacher that you have comments. So I'm pumped about this. I think we can have this more. And keep in mind, as Captain Perkins and her department said, they have found the money to keep us level, even though this fund has dropped, at least over the next year. So we've even got a safety program for this year where we have to do funding. So we've got to move out of the anger and into the let's get it done.
So, Dinah, they didn't plug in the big clock, but we got about 30 minutes. So I guess what I need you to do is, what are our next immediate steps? Any special messages you need to share with us? And let's move down the agenda.
Thank you, Scott. What we will make sure that the RACs all have these documents, not only the paper copies, but electronic copies, so that they can then begin to distribute that and use that within their RACs. And I agree with Daryl. I mean, this is frustrating. This is irritating. We can all be in the hole and just start fighting each other, or we can come out swinging together at those that are opposing us. And I think this is a real opportunity because of the Sunset Advisory Commission, because of the HPP fund cuts, because of the tobacco fund cuts, because of the driver responsibility program being hit. We don't have any place to put our back against except each other. And we have got to work together. I think this is a prime opportunity. The first significant trauma funding came when they were reporting in not only the state papers, but in national news about the diversions and how bad the trauma system was in 2002. And from that, in the midst of a $10 billion budget deficit, a state budget deficit, we got House Bill 3588. So this is another opportunity where we can put our backs against the wall, or we can put our backs against each other and come out swinging. And I know this community. I've seen all of us come together before, and I know that we can do it again. So we do have a coordinated effort that we're moving forward. It's going to take all of you all helping to implement. We can put the shiniest, best-looking documents together. We can put all kinds of fancy things on our website, and you can connect to this and that. But if we don't go out and do it, it doesn't matter. So this is a call to action that we come out swinging. One of the things, there was a couple things that came out of our meeting on Friday. Some research data needs that are being farmed out and working on, including looking at other states and how they have their trauma systems, and looking at, are there things that we can mirror, borrow from, etc. So we're doing some research on that. And then also hoping to bring in another meeting of the minds and growing it from our meeting on Friday to include several more of the prominent emergency healthcare trauma professionals in the state. Again, to just sort of, if we have a clean slate of what do we want the trauma and emergency healthcare system in Texas to look like, what does that look like? And again, mirroring that with Sunset Advisory Commission and then some of our financial asks. I think that concludes that portion, unless there are any others that were at the meeting on Friday that think of something that I have not added. Yes. Absolutely.
We're tracking the numbers now, and we'll be able to get the information out. But it is critical when there's a call, there's a meeting or a hearing or something, and some of these are last minute. Most people cannot go last minute, but if you can, you might be one of only a handful of voices, but it will make a difference because at least there's a voice in the room. And so it is really, really important to just be aware of what's going on, work with your EDs, and just pay attention to what's going on. And all of us looking for these things, all of us searching for these bills will help everyone. So I just wanted, everyone is important. Don't think because you're at a level 4 and you're just a registrar or something like that, or you're a paramedic at a small volunteer department that you're not important. Everyone is important.
Leanne, I think you make an excellent point in that I think everybody in this room or everybody watching this webinar, everybody interested in EMS and trauma care should go online to texas.gov or whatever the website is and make their own little account. And then TTAF can provide us with keywords, and I think you can enter those in so that when a keyword is in some legislation is struck, it gives you an announcement so that we're all ahead of the curve, or at least at the curve anyway, as opposed to being Oh, really? That happened yesterday? You know, that kind of deal. So excellent point, Leanne.
So I do want to, Dr. Davis, actually, if you do have a little PowerPoint that I'm going to switch gears a little bit as we, Dr. Davis has spent considerable time on TQIP, and he and I have had some discussions, as well as Jory and Dr. Stewart and Dr. Eastridge, I believe, on TQIP and expanding that in Texas. And as I'm transitioning, trying to talk and pull this up, awesome. You talk. The last piece that I did want to update is that the University of Houston, we have talked to Patricia Gray, who is on there. I believe she's the director of research. She used to be a state legislator. She was actually the chair of Sunset. When she was a member, she was chair of public health, so she's very familiar with our healthcare system and the legislative system. She is at the point of developing a contract and what they believe they can provide as far as deliverables for a trauma system evaluation. It would be different than what we saw for the American College of Surgeons. What we've asked some focus on is the funding piece. They have been in the midst of finishing up their semester and finals, and she was aware that we were having our board meeting today, was trying to get a contract to us today. We do not have that today, but I do feel very comfortable that we will have it in the next week, because I do know that classes or their exams end in this week. And so she is committed to that. If any of you all know her, she is golden. She is one of those people that when she says something, she does it, and she is incredibly smart. The staff that she is tapping to help with this project also have a vast knowledge and expertise. One of their main researchers has worked for Dr. Frist up in D.C., has a background in Georgetown, went to Georgetown Law School, so very, very highly educated, but also aware of what happens in the legislature, that yes, you can come up with these pie-in-the-sky ideas, but if it doesn't speak to the legislature, it's not going to pass. So we're excited about that. I think that will be another tool in our arsenal as we move forward with our legislative front, that it will help to validate some of the numbers that we come up with. And I'm really excited that she has given me a verbal commitment that they are willing to move forward with us and partnering on that study. So any questions on that? Okay. So
I was going to let you leave it there for a second, because you said it's a breathing or a living document, right?
Yes.
So one thing I was going to say
now that he's got the mic.
is that I think that we should be clear on the fact that Texas does have an excellent trauma system, but it's always been underfunded. And, you know, I think that needs to be clear. Despite funding limitations, we've been able to achieve these things, and you may want to include some language about that.
Okay. I'm not
Just
sure.
It's on you, so I'll put it close. Gotta get real close to it.
Where are you?
Yeah.
Yes.
You guys hear me okay? That's not me. I'm using pretty loud.
Doc, the only reason to use the mic is for the webinar thing, I think.
Okay. Hopefully this is working. So I'm Matt Davis. I'm the trauma director for Baylor Scott & White Healthcare System. And a few months ago, Jory and I were at the national TQIP meeting it was in Phoenix, and started talking about the idea of bringing TQIP to Texas. So some of you guys probably heard me talk about this, so I'm not going to go back and start from the very beginning again. But TQIP stands for Trauma Quality Improvement Program. It's run under the American College of Surgeons Committee on Trauma. If you can see here nationally, the number of hospitals that have been a part of that have been growing substantially. think we're looking at 220 to 240 for the coming up year, so it's becoming pretty significant. In Texas here, I've listed all the hospitals that are involved in it right now. I'm not going to read each one of them. You guys can peruse the list as I flip through these couple of slides. And then we have a few more that are coming on board this year. And so there's quite a number of hospitals in Texas that are becoming a part of this. This is right now for level 1 and level 2 trauma centers. And so what we're talking about doing is having TQIP run a state level analysis where all the hospitals that are involved in TQIP will submit their data as they normally do to TQIP for their individual reports, but then also we also can get state level reports where we can look at our state as a whole or look at regions. So TQIP can offer us these state level reports. They can also do some in-state training. They're going to bring someone to our state to do training for the registrars and for the trauma PI folks that are in the state. I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. Really one of the key things is collaboration on your data validation and then also what you do with the reports. And so I'll talk a little bit about that more in a minute. But leadership and a variety of different analytic approaches. For Texas specifically, they want to enhance the state level PI. Again, compare across state regions. Texas is pretty diverse geographically as well as socioeconomically, so we can look at the Houston region versus Dallas versus the Hill Country versus West Texas or whatever. So there's a lot of different ways we can do that. And the educational offerings again. So the specifics that I wanted to talk about today, this is the new things, is I've gotten the actual quote from Melanie Neal and TQIP and how much this will cost us as a state to do this. And I was actually pleasantly surprised that it's not terribly expensive. Everyone has, every hospital that's involved has to continue to pay their normal yearly fee, which we've all been doing. And then the extra for the state is $12,000 per year. And that's for the entire state report. And that includes essentially registration for 2 people to attend the national TQIP meeting. You guys at individual hospitals get some of that too. There's registration included for that. It does not include travel and room and board, but it does include the registration. Unlimited access to online TQIP training. They will send people here once a year. We can pick the date, we can pick the time, we can pick the place to do in-state training. And that's something we'll all discuss as that comes up. They'll provide the speakers and the trainers that come to actually do that in-state work. There are also conference calls and webinars and things of that nature for educational purposes, both that and to also interpret your reports that we get as a state. And that'll be helpful, I think, especially for the first couple of times we go through that process. More educational activities, clinical PI reports. What is really included in the package is 2 kind of standard risk-adjusted outcome reports with TQIP. Participants in state identification with permission from the hospitals will have to agree for this. And then there's be a third report that we can kind of specifically design for Texas. We have to kind of agree upon that as a state and then get TQIP to agree, yeah, we can actually do that. And then we can have that third kind of unique report. We can have additional reports available to us, or we can create however many we want, as much as you want to pay for. So I don't know what the extra fees are for those additional reports. It probably depends on the number of man hours that go into creating that information. We've mentioned before some of the legal considerations, our contract with state entities. After talking about this at length, we really feel like this needs to be a non-governmental. It needs to be a private organization. The main groups we've looked at was the Committee on Trauma for the state. The problem with that is that there's 2 chapters. There's a North chapter and a South chapter, and so which one gets it? So I think that the best thing is going to be for TTAF to really be what houses this, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. We have to make sure we understand the confidentiality rules. Individual hospital contracts will all have to be amended, I guess is the right word, to reflect involvement in the state level process. Everyone that I've talked to so far has been excited about this. So if anybody out there has any qualms or worries, I'd love for you to speak up today because no one's said anything to me about that. So where we are now. So I think after discussion with some of the trauma medical directors as well as other trauma leaders in the state and Dinah, Jory, et cetera, along with TQIP being in this discussion, we feel like the best option is to house the data at TTAF. What I don't want, and again, I'm sharing this because I believe that this is an important thing for us to do, but I'm sharing it as Matt Davis, an interested trauma surgeon in Texas, not Matt Davis, Baylor Scott and White. And I don't want there to be even an appearance that Matt Davis from Baylor Scott and White has your hospital's data. Because that's not what this is about. This is about us as a state improving. And so this can be very clear. This is a non-competitive thing. No one will use any of this data for saying my hospital is better than yours at X, Y, or Z. That's not what this is about. This is about collaboration to improve care across the entire state. We kind of started putting together a TQIP committee, and some of you guys have emailed me, and I have your email, and we're going to get you involved as this process starts. Right now, we've got to get it funded and get it actually going. But I'm going to need all centers that are involved in this to participate in phone calls and in meetings so that we can evaluate these reports and understand exactly what they mean. And this is really what is the most important part, is the collaborative effort. And there are going to be hospitals among us who perform really, really well at certain things, and other hospitals among us who perform poorly. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're all here to improve. And so we can look at best practice, best practices from some of the higher performing hospitals and try to understand are there things we can learn for other hospitals to bring everybody up to a better performance. And that's one of the things that I think will be really, really neat from this thing. So the funding options, really there's two as I see them. Number one is to split the cost among all trauma centers that are participating. That's really a fairly small amount if you think about it per trauma center. That's going to require you going to your hospital administration and approving some extra dollars, which for us it's like I can't even get like coffee, it feels like. So the other option was to potentially fund this via TTAF, and I know that I've talked to Jory and Dinah about that, and so that would be to bring it in front of whichever groups of folks that has to be brought through and approved as a funding item through TTAF. So that's my vote, is to do that. I think that's going to be the cleanest and the simplest. I think TTAF is the ideal place for this entire process to happen, and I think it has the best interest of the entire trauma system in Texas at heart. And so that's what I would say. And I'm not going to talk much more, so that's it.
Dr. Davis, to go back to the one slide that you had that talked about the cost, because I think this is a discussion with the board and an awareness by our stakeholders. This is, you and I had discussions, and we thought it was probably about this range. And we have our next TTAF board call in 3 weeks, and I think in that 3 weeks to do a little bit further, vetting, information that may be needed by the board to make a decision based on where our budget is for the current fiscal year. With some additional surveys that we've done, there is the opportunity to include this in our budget for the current fiscal year. But again, that is a discussion that we should, further with the board, with our treasurer, not here today, Jim Parisi. I think it would be good to just further that discussion. But I want to make sure you all are aware of what is being asked.
So is the $12,000 an umbrella cost that TTAF would pay that would include any hospital level 1, 2, 3, or 4 that wanted to participate, or does each hospital have to pay $12,000?
No, each hospital already has to pay $12,000 for their individual involvement with TQIP. Or is it $9,000? It's $9,000. $9,000.
This is additional.
So now for the state level report, it's $12,000 overall for the entire state.
Gotcha.
And to be clear, at this point, it's only 1s and 2s.
Right.
There are no 3 or 4s that are involved in TQIP. There is thought to be some change on that in the horizon, because in the Orange Book there's talk about even lower level hospitals having enrollment in a risk adjusted benchmarking for complications, morbidity, mortality. That is, I do a lot of work with the TQIP people. There's not a lot of them, and that is like a huge change in their workload to try to tackle that, and to really even understand what you're trying to benchmark at a level 3 and a level 4 center as opposed to level 1, level 2. It's just different worlds.
Right.
So I don't anticipate that's going to happen anytime soon. I think they're going to pilot some level 3 stuff in Arkansas in the next year or two, but this is not going to be widely available for 3s or 4s. Right?
Okay.
Dr. Davis, I really appreciate you being here, putting this all together for us to share. I know you've spoken at Trauma Systems Committee and others. Any questions, further questions from the board or stakeholders at this time?
I guess my thought is if we decide to go down this path, you put up a list of the hospitals that are currently participating. Have you what would be your anticipation of additional hospitals joining in if this became a statewide project? In other words, I'll use ETMC, and I don't know if they were on the list, but let's say ETMC Tyler is not participating in TQIP today, but because we choose to do the statewide project, that ETMC says, all right, we'll do it, any discussions you've had?
That's the case. I would love for all of our level 1, level 2 trauma centers in Texas to be involved in TQIP. I almost think it should be mandatory. Like in California and LA County, they're doing a big project on this, and they've essentially made it mandatory that all level 1s and level 2s are involved in this. I believe in it that strongly. I think that the data, while it's not perfect, is better than anything else that's out there, and allows us to pick up areas where we are providing care that is not up to the standard we think it should be. We don't often know how good our care is until we get this kind of information. And really, risk-adjusted benchmarking for trauma care is hard to come by, and I think TQIP has done the best job so far of any entity out there. So I do hope that it encourages other centers to become involved, and that's not going to change the cost. It'll just mean that we'll have to get their data involved and get them to have an addendum to their contract, and the same things that we have to do for the hospitals that are here now. So. I can flip back and count. I didn't. One more.
7 on that
Yes,
page.
there's 7 plus 3. 17, I believe, plus several more, and 17 sounds right now I'm thinking about it. Plus there were several more that are joining. It's like another 6 or so that I know of that are joining. That'll bring actually up to 23.
Children's hospitals.
Well, that's great.
But you have to pull the PD centers out of that, though, because the TQIP for PD is not the same. It's not, so you can't really include those in the numbers that you're considering here.
Yeah, and that's something, that's a good point, actually, is that the TQIP for children is very different than it is for adults. So I don't know, I'm going to talk to Melanie from the college about how that would work, but I don't know that we can include the children's hospitals in this state level stuff, just because I think it's going to be, the deliverables and the data and all the things you're looking at for children are vastly different, just because the mortality is so different than adults. So, yes, ma'am.
So, I'm in Delta, and we started TQIP this year. This is the first year that TQIP for peds is applicable. And we know that it's, at the meeting in Phoenix, we know that the benchmarks and some of the information that we're participating in TQIP doesn't really apply to kids at all. We're still doing it. Again, when adult TQIP started, there was a lot of that until we sort of got into the group. So I would encourage that we should look at that, since a lot of kids are cared for at adult facilities.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just depends on what you're looking at, because the reports that come for children's hospitals are different than the reports that come for adults hospitals. And so I don't know that we can lump them all together. I think we'll have, I don't know, I haven't spoken about this specifically with the TQIP people, but it may be possible we can have a Texas report for children's hospitals and a Texas report for adult hospitals. We probably can't have a massive report for them all. They'll have to be separated. I'm going to have to see how they feel about that, because that would be the first time that's been done.
So, in the interest of time, I appreciate your presentation, Dr. Davis, and what I'm hearing is this is on the front burner. We're going to get more information about it at the next board conference call, right? Mm-hmm. And at some point in time in the near future, we'll make a determination whether TTAF needs to be the housing of this data and potentially fund the statewide project.
Yes.
Does that appease the board? Okay.
Thank you, Scott. I think because we are about to get the hook or the gong or something like that, we will move our treasurer's report and secretary's report that TTAF still runs, or even if we don't approve. I will just say very quickly that we do have a positive bottom line, and those financials have been provided to the board, as well as an overview that we will provide at our June 4th call. I
think the minutes from the conference call that we did last month have been posted. We can probably approve them real quick in the last 2 minutes and get that out of the way.
That'd be great.
If y'all,
Second.
Kathy and Courtney, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, Donna.
And we will hold on the finances, even though y'all have the overview, all that. But y'all can see, just for your information, where we are as an organization right now. And our next meeting will be a conference call June 4th, and then we will meet in person back here August 19th. And our fundraiser will be August 20th here in Austin. So look forward to that, and thank you all for your participation.
So does the board have anything they need to bring forward? All right. Well, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, I guess.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Lori, Lisa. All right.